Hey guys, Jacob Howard here. Today we are in the field going to go over some pre-flight practices and tips that you should normally do when you go out to fly your drone. When you're going out flying, you want to make sure you're checking these things before every flight to make sure that you aren't going to have any issues while you're in the air. So let's jump into it. Okay, so first thing we want to do is make sure we got the props on nice and tight and that they're going the correct direction. For this drone, we are doing props in, which means they turn in towards the front of the camera. On the back, they turn in towards the back of the camera. So currently these are all correct. This one turns counterclockwise, this one turns clockwise, this one turns counterclockwise, and this one turns clockwise. Next thing we want to check is make sure that the props are on nice and tight. We can see right here, this prop turns without turning the motor. This one here, which is properly tightened, turns the motor as well as the prop. So we want to make sure that we tighten these down before takeoff. Like so. So now I've verified all these are tight and they're good to go. Next thing we want to check is make sure all wires and straps are in the correct position. So we have a strap on here. You want this metal bar as close to the frame as you can so that you don't have a bunch of extra hanging out here or hanging where the props are going to hit. Other thing you want to make sure to do, especially with batteries with longer lead wires, you're going to want to make sure that they are strapped in or they are not hanging out loose to where they could be hit by the props. In this case here, we have strapped it on this side and this side to where when we connect, the wires are out of the way of the props and aren't going to get hit. You want to check other things like your RX wire right here and your antenna to make sure that they also are not going to be hit by the props. Other things you want to do is make sure that your antenna is tight on there. If that is loose, that can give you bad signal as well as harm the VTX. Once again, make sure your battery is nice and tight because as you're flying and making quick turns, this will move around a lot. So I'm going to tighten that up so it doesn't move near as much. You also want to make sure that your battery is centered on the frame because if it's too far forward, too far back, that'll put unnecessary load on specific motors. You also want to make sure your camera level is correct. For this case, I'm going to have it down low. Always a good idea to check for any damage. Make sure the props are in good condition. All of these are a little bit beat up, but nothing bad. Make sure you don't have any cracks in your frame. You're not missing zip ties where wires could come loose and get hit and all that stuff. So everything's looking good here. So now we're going to move to the controller. Okay, before you plug in the battery on your drone, you want to make sure to always turn your controller on first.
Welcome to OpenTX.
This is to make sure that when you plug in the drone, if anything crazy happens, you still have control of it with the controller. If you plugged it in and for some reason it armed and started going crazy, you wouldn't be able to control it unless your controller was already on. So always turn your controller on before you plug in your drone. So now that we have the controller turned on, I'm going to plug this in. So you'll notice when I plugged it in from the bottom. Once again, that way if these props turned on or anything, I'd have less chance of hurting myself. Before I lay this down, I'm gonna make sure that these wires, once again, are out of the way of the prop. Even if it comes up, it's still out of the way of the prop. So I'm gonna put that down. So before I take off, I wanna make sure that my beeper is working because if I lose it in grass or something weird happens, I can still locate it by sound. So I'm gonna activate the beeper. And you can hear it is working. So that's a good thing to test before you take off. Another thing to make sure before you plug in the drone is make sure your throttle's all the way down, make sure all your switches are in their correct positions before plugging in the drone. Your controller will usually give you a warning if you have anything activated when you turn on the controller. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna arm it. So I'm gonna flip this switch up and that's going to idle the motors. So they're just gonna sit there. They're not gonna do anything until I start giving it input. So at this point, I don't have my goggles on, so I'm gonna put those on, and then we're gonna take off and go over some of those tips as well. Okay, so now that we have the drone plugged in, we have the controller plugged in, I have my goggles up here. I'm going to press the power on button. And I've already put the antennas on. They're facing the correct way. You wanna make sure the sting pad on your Eachine are facing out, and your omnidirectional does not matter which direction it's facing. I'm gonna click this search button right here, and that will automatically search for the drone's channel. Okay, so we are locked on. Okay, a few things I'm gonna check here is I have my OSD set to where I can look at the battery voltage. So it's good right now, it's at 4.09. Also, it has my RSSI or the radio link or controller link to the drone. You always wanna make sure that your video footage and your radio link look good because if they're looking questionable before you take off, they're probably gonna get a lot worse once you take off. And then it'll be a lot harder trying to fly if your antenna's loose and you're not getting the greatest footage or your radio starts disconnecting. So now before we take off, I'm going to hold down the pick record button. And on the top right here, you'll see a red dot that starts blinking. That means it is recording DVR. You always want to make sure you're recording DVR anytime you fly your drone. So I'm going to arm it now and fly it around for just a little bit. So I'm flying it close to me to start out, just in case there's any issues. And everything's looking good, so now I can actually fly out a little bit. So I'm gonna come in for a landing. So one other thing you want to make sure before you take off is that there's no what we call soft targets around, such as people or animals. If there are, make sure you know where they are, or you have a spotter who is giving you updates on where they are, because it can be hard to spot them while you're flying, and you definitely do not want to hit anybody or anybody's pet. Okay guys, so that covers the pre-flight practices you should be doing every single time you go out to fly, making sure that your drone is in good condition and that you have good signal and that you are attentive to your environment and where you're going to be flying. If you guys have any questions, definitely let us know, and have fun flying.